But at the end of the day, they seem to have a strong mutual respect for each other. And there did seem to be love in there too. I mean, Charles's son was always welcome at his house, even if they did have a bit of tension. And they performed together, and even after Alcuin died, his son Delaborde was like still performing his dad's music and keeping it in the public ear. I mean, Alcuin was a traditionalist, so there was probably a really big part of him that was super ashamed about Delaborde's entire existence. But I mean, he was also an overall decent guy who wanted to help out his son, so he probably just had these these two conflicting personality traits, like being a good guy, being like opposed to having illegitimate children and being dishonorable. Alcuin's traditionalist streak also set him apart from his contemporaries who were very like flashy and fabulous. Like he was definitely like in everything, like his manner, the way he dressed, he was very old-fashioned, and he really liked older music like Baroque and classical music, wasn't a fan of music of the time. So he was just like he was a man from after his time. Charles Alcuin was also one of the first people to put Jewish themes and ideas into art music, like his Opus 31 collection of preludes. He also became infatuated with a musical instrument called the pedalier, and he wrote a lot of pieces for it, but the pedalier it's an obsolete instrument, so there's like an entire body of music of his that's basically just like irrelevant. Interestingly, there are only two known portraits of Charles Alcuin, so I mean, one's a picture from behind, so my editor's shaking his fist right now at that. I know it. After Charles Alcuin's lifetime, he basically disappeared into obscurity until the 1960s, where some dedicated performers decided to bring his music back into repertoire and rotation. I think the main reason that he's less famous than guys like Chopin and Liszt is because of his periods of seclusion, because he went into his first period of seclusion when he was 26 years old. Before that, he had been building his career, becoming more and more well-known, but kind of like when he was like, before he ever really broke through that and became, I guess, like really famous, exploded in popularity, that's when he pulled back and went into, like, he withdrew from society. And then the same thing happened again when he had this like second wind in between his first and second retreats from performing. He like started to become well known again, and then he pulled back before he like exploded in popularity. So I think that's probably the main reason he's not as well known as people like Chopin and Liszt today, because by all other accounts he was just as talented and just as skilled. I think part of it might also have something to do with the fact that he just like pretty much never left Paris, and a lot of other musicians would go on tours to other countries and kind of like spread their name that way, but he didn't. I mean, this is just me speculating though. Like, I'd love to know why you think Charles Alcuin was, you know, he kind of disappeared from public knowledge, but that's what I would think would be like the main reasons. That is all for today's video on Charles Alcuin. Hopefully you learned something. I know that I did. Before doing this video, I actually spent quite a bit of time reading about him, because I didn't know much about him to begin with, because he's not one of the more famous people that, you know, that you study when you're doing exams and stuff like that. But I'm really glad that I did. He's an interesting dude, and it's given me a deeper appreciation for his music. So hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any request ideas, be sure to leave it in the comments area below, and I will catch you guys next time. The first thing that happened was he had a son, and the son's name was Quiet Phone. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. I am Alicia, your host, and today we are going to take a look at the life and times of Sergei Rachmaninoff. And I did have to look up how to pronounce his name on dictionary.com. Rachmaninoff is what it told me to say. I have been mispronouncing his name all this time, so hopefully those of you familiar with the Russian language will accept Rachmaninoff as my pronunciation. It's a little bit of a tangent to start this video on. What we are going to talk about in today's video is Rachmaninoff's life story, the accomplishments that he achieved in his lifetime, his death, his personality, all that good stuff. So let's get started. Let's start with the basics. Rachmaninoff was born in 1873 in Russia during the late Romantic period of music. He did write a lot of late Romantic style pieces, but he also wrote a lot of early 20th century modern style pieces as well. He was a virtuoso pianist and
Hey.
Create professional and beautiful videos faster with Envato Elements. Get unlimited downloads of video and audio assets for your next project for one low cost. Create more with premium templates for transitions, intros.
How's it going, guys? Joshua Lefemi here, and in this video we're going to be talking about the difference between an H.264 codec and a ProRes codec. Now, for those of you guys watching the channel, this is a topic that you may know about, but it's a question that I get a lot, so we're going to revisit it for just a sec. So before we address anything, we have to talk about what is a codec. A video codec is a piece of software that affects the file size of the video file as well as the image quality of the video file. If you take this paper as an example of all the information in the video, a codec is going to compress that paper. The smaller that the paper is compressed, the smaller the file size of the video file, which is great. It means it'll upload to YouTube or any other kind of video hosting platform easily. It can be shared more easily just in general. But the smaller that the video file size is, meaning the more that it's compressed, the less information that you're able to actually hold in the video file, so the image quality goes down. So the more that you compress it, the less the video quality, but the smaller the file size. If you don't compress it enough, you end up with a video file that has a lot of image quality, but the file size is huge. So the thing is, the codec needs to find the perfect medium depending on the situation that you're in. The cool thing about the H.264 codec is it actually does the math for you and gives you the perfect medium to give you a file size for a video file that's small enough to easily be uploaded to YouTube, but that isn't compressed enough to limit the image quality too much. The thing about an H.264 codec is it's something called a final codec or maybe a distribution codec. This is a codec that you export your video to when you're done. You're ready to upload it to the internet and you aren't going to go put it in Premiere and have to export it out again. The reason is if you were to put in an H.264 codec file back into Premiere and export it again, you're going to throw off that balance and you're going to compress the file to a point where you're going to actually see a reduction of image quality. Okay, now hold that thought. We're going to talk about ProRes now. ProRes is something called an intermediate codec because it does the mathematics a little bit differently. This is a codec that you use when, say, you're trying to maybe export out a motion and export it. You're ready, that isn't compressed the perfect medium depending on enough. You end up with a video file that has a lot of image quality, but the file size is huge. So the thing is, the codec needs to find the perfect medium depending on the situation that you're in. The cool thing about the H.264 codec is it actually does the math for you and gives you the perfect medium to give you a file size for a video file that's small enough to easily be uploaded to YouTube, but that isn't compressed enough to limit the image quality too much. The thing about an H.264 codec is it's something called a final codec or maybe a distribution codec. This is a codec that you export your video to when you're done. You're ready to upload it to the internet and you aren't going to go put it in Premiere and have to export it out again. The reason is if you were to put in an H.264 codec file back into Premiere and export it again, you're going to throw off that balance and you're going to compress the